It was supposed to be just another ordinary evening at this quiet, tucked-away restaurant on the edge of town. The kind of place where people come for comfort food and a warm smile, not life-changing moments. But on this particular night, something unexpected was about to unfold. A billionaire. Yes, that asterisk kind of billionaire, the kind you read about in magazines, walked in, alone and unannounced. No entourage, no reservation, just a quiet man in a crisp suit looking for a simple meal and maybe a moment of peace. As he sat down at the far end of the dining room, unnoticed by most, the hum of the kitchen just beyond the swinging doors carried a different energy. Amid the clatter of dishes and the sizzle of pans, there was a hushed, shaky voice. A young waitress, probably no older than 20, stood in the corner of the kitchen, her back turned, her phone pressed to her ear. Her hands trembled as she whispered into the phone, and then her voice cracked. She was crying. Not the loud, dramatic kind of crying, but the quiet, tired kind. The kind that tells you someone's been holding it in for too long. The billionaire had only caught a glimpse. A flash of her as the kitchen doors swung open, her face, wet with tears, trying to hide behind a wall of hanging aprons. He wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but something about her pain hit him harder than he expected. He had no idea who she was or what her story might be, but something about the way she wiped her tears, straightened her posture, and forced a smile as she returned to the floor pulled at him. The waitress greeted him a few minutes later, polite but distant, clearly trying to keep herself together. She poured his water with a shaky hand and asked for his order with a practiced smile. He could see through it, though. There was something in her eyes, fear, exhaustion, maybe even desperation. Something told him this wasn't just a bad day. He didn't say much at first. He just watched, listened, observed how she moved between tables, quiet and invisible, doing her best not to draw attention. But little did she know, she already had his full attention. And then, just as the night was winding down, he made a phone call. Just one. Calm, quiet, but with purpose. And what happened next would turn that waitress's entire life upside down. The waitress's name was Emily, just 21, juggling 2 part-time jobs and night classes at the community college, all while trying to help her younger brother stay in school. Their parents were gone. Her mom passed away when she was a teenager, and her dad had disappeared not long after. Since then, it had been just the two of them. She never complained, not out loud, but the weight she carried was too much for someone her age. The call she had taken in the kitchen earlier was from her landlord. Another warning, another deadline. She was already 2 weeks behind on rent, and now he was threatening eviction if she didn't come up with something by the end of the week. Her paycheck was due tomorrow, but it wouldn't even be enough to cover groceries and her brother's school fees. She felt like she was running out of time, and worse, out of hope. None of this was visible to the diners who passed her by, caught up in their own lives. But the billionaire, whose name was Daniel Cole, noticed everything. He had once lived a life far from the wealth and boardrooms he now occupied. Raised by a single mother who worked double shifts to keep food on the table, Daniel understood what quiet struggle looked like. And even though he'd built his empire over decades, he never forgot where he came from. Something about Emily's composure, the way she refused to fall apart in front of anyone, reminded him of his own mother. That memory stirred something in him, something he hadn't felt in years. He had come to the restaurant that night just to escape a corporate dinner. He never imagined he'd find a story he couldn't walk away from. As he ate quietly, he asked the manager for the check, but he also asked something else, Emily's name. The manager hesitated, not wanting to betray any staff privacy, but eventually gave in when Daniel simply said, "I'd like to leave a tip that might matter." After making his quiet phone call from the corner booth, Daniel didn't linger. He thanked Emily softly on his way out. She smiled, polite, unaware that anything had changed. She didn't even see the folded envelope he left behind under his plate, or the number he scribbled on the back with a short note, "Call me if you ever need a hand." But by the time Emily discovered the envelope, Daniel was long gone. And what she found inside would leave her frozen in disbelief, because it wasn't just a note. It was something much more. Something that would make her question everything she thought she knew about fate. Emily stared at the envelope, her fingers trembling as she unfolded the paper tucked inside. It wasn't just a note. It was a personal check, made out to her, for $10,000. Her breath caught. At first, she thought it had to be a mistake. Maybe he left it at the wrong table. Maybe it wasn't meant for her at all. But the note on the back of the receipt told her otherwise. You don't know me, but I believe in helping people who've helped themselves. Call me if you want to talk. DC*. Her heart pounded. $10,000 could fix everything, at least for now. It could cover the rent, her brother's school supplies, the overdue electric bill, even give her a small break from the constant anxiety. But it also brought questions. Why would a stranger do something like this? What did he want in return? Was this some kind of trap? She slipped the envelope into her bag, still unsure what to think. That night, she didn't sleep much. Her thoughts raced between panic and relief, doubt and wonder. The next day, she found herself Googling his name, Daniel Cole. The search results confirmed it. Billionaire investor. Philanthropist. Known for disappearing from the public eye and reappearing in unexpected ways. But there was no obvious connection between them. Just that brief moment, her tears in the kitchen, and somehow, he'd seen more than she meant to show. Meanwhile, Daniel sat in his office, staring out the floor-to-ceiling windows of his downtown high-rise. He didn't know if she'd ever call. He hadn't done this out of pity. He did it because he saw something familiar in her, grit, strength, and maybe a bit of pride that wouldn't let her ask for help, even when she needed it most. But a part of him also felt uneasy. He hadn't told anyone what he'd done, not even his assistant. He wasn't sure why. Maybe because it wasn't business. Maybe because it felt personal. As the days passed, Emily wrestled with her conscience. Part of her wanted to cash the check and move on, but another part kept whispering. Nothing comes for free. She kept the envelope tucked in her drawer, untouched. She went to work, went to class, and tried to pretend things were normal. But everything had changed. The secret burned in the back of her mind. Then, just as she was starting to convince herself to forget the whole thing, her brother came home with a suspension notice from school. A fight, a warning, one more strike and he'd be expelled. And that's when she knew she couldn't ignore the note anymore. But picking up the phone might lead her into something far more complicated than she ever imagined. Days passed, and Emily's world grew heavier. Every time she looked at the envelope tucked away in her drawer, it felt like a silent reminder of a choice she had yet to make. A choice that could change everything, but also carry risks she wasn't ready to face. Her brother's suspension notice lay on the kitchen table, staring back at her like a challenge. He was furious and scared, and Emily felt torn between wanting to protect him and fearing that accepting help from a stranger, especially one so powerful, could bring more trouble than relief. Late one evening, after her shift ended, Emily found herself sitting on the worn steps outside the restaurant, the cool night air brushing against her face. Her phone vibrated in her pocket. It was an unknown number. Her heart skipped. Could it be him? Was this finally the moment when the billionaire would reach out again? Or was it something else entirely? She hesitated before answering, the weight of uncertainty pressing down on her. "Hello, Emily." The voice was calm but firm. "This is Daniel Cole." Her breath caught. She swallowed hard and nodded, even though he couldn't see her. "Yes, I got your note." There was a pause, then he said, "I don't expect you to understand why I'm doing this, not yet. But I want you to know I'm here to help, if you want it." Emily bit her lip, fighting back the flood of emotions. "Why me? Why did you notice me?" Daniel's voice softened. "Because I see what you're going through. And because sometimes all it takes is one person believing in you to change everything." But even as she listened, a knot of doubt tightened inside her. She wondered what accepting this help would mean. Would it come with strings attached? Would it bring unwanted attention? Could she trust someone so far removed from her world? Meanwhile, Daniel sat in his office, tension coiling inside him like a spring ready to snap. He had opened a door that might lead to something incredible or dangerous. His past was full of people who'd used his kindness for their own gain. Could Emily be different? Could she be the one who changed his life as much as he hoped to change hers? The next day, Emily found herself staring at the check again, her fingers trembling. Her phone buzzed with a text from Daniel. *, meet me. Tomorrow, noon, the cafe on 5th. *. She wasn't sure what would happen at that meeting, what questions he'd ask, or what truths she might have to reveal. But one thing was clear. This was the moment everything would shift. The moment she had to decide whether to step into a new life or stay where she was, holding onto the pieces of a struggling past. As she got ready to leave for the cafe, her phone rang again. This time, it wasn't Daniel. It was the landlord. "You have until the end of the week," he said, voice cold. "No exceptions." Emily's hands shook. The clock was ticking, and the stakes had never been higher. Whatever happened next, there was no turning back. Emily didn't sleep much that night. She kept playing out every possible version of the next day's meeting in her mind. What she would say, what Daniel might expect, and whether she was walking into something far bigger than she could handle. The check sat on the table beside her like it was watching her, waiting for her to make a move. But time was no longer on her side. The landlord's voice still echoed in her head. No exceptions. By late morning, she dressed carefully, not too formal, not too casual. She wanted to look put together, but not like she was trying too hard. She left the check in her bag, unsure whether she would return it or cash it. When she arrived at the cafe, Daniel was already there, sitting at a quiet corner table, sipping black coffee. He looked calm, almost unreadable, but when he saw her, he stood up and gave her a small, warm smile. They spoke for a while, cautiously at first. Emily told him bits of her story, holding back the heavier parts. Daniel, in turn, offered small pieces of his own life. It was strange, almost surreal, to be sitting across from someone so powerful and yet so human. Just when she began to feel like maybe this wasn't a mistake, Daniel leaned in slightly and said, "I need to be honest with you. There's something I didn't tell you." Her heart skipped. She tensed. "What is it?" He hesitated, then said, "Someone has been following me, or rather, watching the people I've tried to help." His eyes met hers. "I think you might be next." Emily blinked, confused. "What do you mean? Why would someone care about me?" "There's a man I've clashed with before," Daniel said slowly. "A former business partner. He doesn't like what I do, offering help without profit. He thinks it's weakness, and he's been known to interfere." He paused, to send messages. Emily's blood ran cold. "You think someone's going to come after me?" "I don't know," Daniel said quietly. "But if they do, it won't feel random. It'll feel personal." Suddenly, her phone buzzed on the table. A text. No name, just a number she didn't recognize. The message read, "Careful who you trust. Not everything is what it seems." Her hands went cold. She looked up at Daniel. "Did you?" He shook his head slowly. "No." The air between them shifted. The cafe, once warm and safe, now felt full of shadows. Emily realized this wasn't just about a check anymore. This was something deeper. Someone was watching, and she had just stepped into a game she didn't even know was being played. Emily's hands trembled as she held the phone. The message stared back at her like a warning carved in stone. Careful who you trust. Not everything is what it seems. Her eyes darted to Daniel, searching his face for any trace of deception. But he looked just as confused, concerned even. The way he leaned forward, the tension in his voice, it all felt too real to be fake. Still, the doubt had crept in, and it was growing. Why me? she asked again, this time sharper. You've helped people before. Why would someone threaten me over this? Daniel sighed, lowering his voice. Because this time, I didn't just give a donation or fund a project. I made a choice to get involved. Directly. I don't do that anymore. Not since the last person I helped ended up being used as leverage against me. Emily's mind raced. All of this over a check. A chance meeting. It didn't add up. She stood, needing air, needing space. But before she could leave, another text came in. This time it wasn't cryptic. It was a photo. Of her. Walking into the cafe. Someone was watching her right now. Her heart pounded. This isn't just about helping someone, is it? She said, turning back to Daniel. What are you not telling me? Daniel hesitated too long before answering. There's money missing, he said finally, from one of my accounts. Millions. And whoever's behind it is trying to frame someone close to me. I think helping you might have triggered something. I didn't expect them to come after you this fast. Emily's stomach dropped. So it wasn't just charity, it was connected to something bigger. She felt like she'd been pulled into a current too strong to fight. But then she remembered her brother. The eviction notice. The fear that had lived in her chest for months. She was already drowning before Daniel ever showed up. She looked him dead in the eye. So what now? Daniel stood slowly, sliding a flash drive across the table. I think they've been using your restaurant. Cameras. Signals. You might have seen something and didn't know it. Emily took the drive with shaking fingers. And what if I don't want any part of this? You're already in it, he said. But maybe that's not the worst thing. The next day, Emily handed the flash drive to a trusted local journalist, someone who'd once covered corruption in the city. What the reporter uncovered shook the foundations of several major corporations, including the one Daniel's former partner controlled. But just when it seemed like everything was coming to light, Emily received one final message. Asterisk, you weren't the only waitress we were watching. Asterisk. Her breath caught. Somewhere, someone else was in danger. The story wasn't over. Not yet. Emily sat in silence, the last message still glowing on her screen. Asterisk, you weren't the only waitress we were watching. Asterisk. A chill ran through her. But this time, instead of fear, something steadier settled in. Determination. She had spent too long reacting to life, barely keeping her head above water. Now she was ready to take a stand. She called Daniel and told him about the message. His voice on the other end was tight but calm. Then we'll find out who they are, he said, and we'll stop them for good. Within days, the journalist Emily had trusted published a story that exposed the corruption tied to Daniel's former partner. Surveillance equipment hidden in restaurants, illegal data collection, blackmail schemes, all of it was finally brought into the light. Authorities launched an investigation, and arrests followed. Several people who had been exploited in silence, waitresses, janitors, delivery drivers, finally had their voices heard. What started with Emily's courage turned into a larger movement. A ripple became a wave. Daniel's name was cleared, the missing money traced. But more importantly, the man who had once tried to use people like Emily as pawns had been stopped. As for Emily, life didn't magically become perfect overnight. She still worked hard, still juggled classes and bills. But things were different now. She paid the rent ahead of time for the first time in months. Her brother was reinstated at school with counseling and support, and Emily, for once, didn't feel like she was barely surviving. She felt like she was moving forward. Daniel stayed in touch. Not in the way people expected. There was no flashy publicity, no headlines, just quiet check-ins, the occasional coffee, and genuine support. He once told her, I thought I was helping you that night, but I think you ended up helping me more. Emily smiled at that, because through everything, the struggle, the danger, the fear, she had discovered something she never expected. Her story mattered. Her voice had power. And in a world full of chaos and distraction, even the smallest act of noticing someone in pain could start something incredible. The story of the billionaire and the waitress wasn't one of luck. It was one of choice, of courage, and of refusing to stay invisible. And while the danger had passed, the lesson remained. Sometimes the most unexpected people can spark the biggest change. As she walked home from her shift one evening, the city lights glowing around her, Emily looked up at the sky and whispered a quiet promise to never look away when someone else was hurting. Because she knew now, one moment of kindness could change an entire life.